afternoon. I'm Michael Malice, and let that be your welcome for the next hour. We have with us, I'm up at 8:30. I have not been up at 8:30 for probably a few years because I am self-employed, set my own schedule. And the reason I'm up at 8:30 is because one of the most interesting people in the world, Janae Marie Kroc, is here as our special guest. And let me give people the backstory. So you're the subject of the documentary Transformer. People can see it on Netflix. You were, for years, a very prominent powerlifter. Now you came out as transgender. But let's be clear. You're not, oh, some random powerlifter became transgender. You were a legend in your sport. And let me explain to people what a legend. First of all, world record holder. Best in the world. None of this Bruce Jenner stuff where he's beating some amateurs at the Olympics. You beat everyone, including a squat of over 1,000 pounds. Yes?
Yes.
Then you have a lift named after you. You are so prominent in your sport. There's like 4 people. There's the Arnold press after Arnold Schwarzenegger, the Pendlay row after Glenn Pendlay, the deadlift after Kevin Deadlift, and the Kroc row, which is named after you. How do you get a lift named after you?
Well, that's actually a funny story. For those of you that are familiar with the lifting community, Jim Wendler, real popular lifter, he's the creator of 531, was with EliteFTS.com for a long time, one of my longtime sponsors, and some really great people. And when Elite first picked me up after I won the Arnold Classic in 2006, you know, they had me come down, did some interviews, and do a couple workouts, you know, that they could film and just talk about things. And so I go down to London, Ohio, just outside Columbus. And so they saw me. I had brought my own special handle because there wasn't handles big enough or dumbbells big enough for the rows I was doing. And at that time, I was only using about 225, and I was doing like, I believe I did like sets of like 25 to 30 reps. Oh, and eventually I worked my way up to, I think my PR was 300 for 13 reps was the most I did.
Okay.
And but Jim saw me doing these. I was just doing like a back workout, and he saw me doing these, and he started asking me a lot of questions about why so heavy, you know, why the high reps. And I was explaining to him that I felt, you know, it really helped my upper back strength, which contributed to my my deadlift lockout, and then also helped with my grip strength. And because I would do them 2 ways. I would do them without straps for as many reps as I could, basically until my grip failed. And then I would do it with straps really heavy to really work my upper back. And so Wendler asked me a lot about it. He incorporated it into his workouts, found that it benefited him. He told some other people that he kind of trained about it, and they started using it, and it also helped their deadlift and helped their grip strength. And then he's the one who started calling them Kroc rows. So Jim's the one that actually gave the exercise's name, and I never really referred to them as that. I just, you know, had really heavy dumbbell rows, but I had a couple. My technique was a little different. I explained to him why I did it that way, but yeah, that's how it caught on. It was Wendler that gave the name.
Yeah, well, you'd call them my rows. It's not like Chinese people call Chinese food; they call it food. So let's talk about squatting 1,000 pounds, right? Mm-hmm. No matter how strong you are, you're standing there, you're looking at all those plates. It's got to be intimidating.
You know, the funny thing is for me, I never felt that way about it. You know, I've been asked a number of times, like, gosh, isn't it just crazy getting under that? I never thought of it that way. I always thought that, you know, if you can lift 700, why not 800? If you can lift 800, why not 900? You know, and then on and on. And I just always saw them as numbers. And I always felt like, too, that the way I looked at things a lot of times was, if someone else could accomplish it, why not me? And a lot of times I would think, well, if a bunch of other people have accomplished it, definitely me. And I wanted to be the person that had done stuff that no one had ever done. And so, like, yeah, I mean, there were times like in training, the weights felt a lot heavier than they did in competition. I remember the first time I had over 1,000 on my back. There's a like a hardcore strength gym in the Detroit area called Detroit Barbell, and that was the first time that I actually took over 1,000 in training, and it was like 1,015. I don't know, just didn't want to make it 1,000 even, had to go a little bit more. And I remember when I unracked it, well, it definitely felt like half a ton on my back. And when I picked it up out of the racks, it felt like a ton of weight. But the first time I squatted it in competition, I didn't even notice the weight. Like, you know, you're so amped up, you have the adrenaline flowing. I would focus on a couple technique cues. You know, I would get really psyched up, get in that zone. And then there was just a couple things. Like for me, my cues were, anybody who's familiar with powerlifting, Ed Cohn, in my opinion, the greatest powerlifter of all time. Well, he would talk about when you squat, like opening your groin, basically driving your knees out and sitting back. So those are the two things I would think about, is opening my groin and sitting back. And those were the 2 technique cues, as long as I stayed in my groove. And at that point, when you get squatting like the heavier weights, you're up around 900,000 plus pounds, a lot of times it's not the strength that causes you to miss the lift, it's the technique. Everything has to be so precise. And with, the balance and then the difference with the bars, when you get that much weight on the bar, if you have a bar that's not a really good stiff bar, it can whip really bad. And even on good bars, and what we call whipping is basically the bar starts bouncing up and down. You move a little bit, if you're shaking at all, and then those weights, it starts to bounce. Well, then it just gets worse and worse and worse. And then sometimes it'll actually start moving back and forth. And so here you are, you're trying to squat down into the hole with 1,000 pounds on your back, and the bar is moving back and forth and trying to throw you off balance. So for me, towards the end, it was more just about having my technique perfect and staying in that groove and controlling the weight versus actually having the strength to lift it. Like that really wasn't an issue as much as just being able to stay in that groove, hit proper depth, and come up with it clean.
Before you got into powerlifting, you were a bodybuilder.
I was always into working out. I started training when I was like 9 years old. And I did do a bodybuilding show prior to like seriously getting into powerlifting, but I also did a couple like high school powerlifting competitions, which I didn't do very well at. I actually got my butt kicked.
But when was the last time that you could walk around and just fit in? Has that ever been, so not as an adult?
Yeah, no, probably by the time I graduated high school, I was known as that lifter person.
Yeah.
You have these high school mock elections. Well, my senior year, I won Mr. Physique. Okay. And so by that point, I was getting known as like the lifter kid that was always in the gym and was getting muscular enough where I stood out a little bit. Excuse me. But yeah, I was actually really small and skinny to start with. Like my dad is my height, my frame, and weighs like 106 pounds right now. He's super tiny. And I played freshman football at 118 pounds. But in high school, I was working really, really hard, and I gained about 20 pounds a year. By the time I graduated, I was about 180 pounds, and my bench was right around 300. I never did. That's one of the things I wanted to do that I didn't do was I wanted to bench 300 before I graduated high school. I was really close. But I didn't get it. And, but yeah, it was, I'd say, in the Marines, then everyone noticed my physique. And of course, with that being so physical and stuff, that always helped me. But yeah, by the time I got out of the Marines, I was about 225. And then throughout my powerlifting career, towards the end of the career, when I was, I guess you'd say in my prime, when I was at my biggest was after I'd basically not consciously retired from powerlifting, but I'd switched over to focus on bodybuilding and trying to get my pro card. And at that time, this was probably 5-6 years ago, maybe a little more than that. I was walking around at 270 to close to 280 pounds, and I'm slightly under 5'9". And at that point, yeah, it's everywhere you go, like everyone stares. And, there's constant comments and people treat you very differently. And in most respects, actually with a lot of, they treat you with a lot of favor. And, there are a lot of women that like that type of physique. There were guys that respect it. When you go places, people just treat you differently. And a lot of times, and I'm not a bully by any means. I was never that type of person. And, but there's all, that instant respect. And, for example, one time I was getting new, tires on a vehicle, and, they didn't have just a set of 2 that I needed. They were trying to sell me all 4. And I was like, look, I only need the 2. And I was actually buying the vehicle. And I said, the only way I'd take it was a used vehicle, was if they put new tires on it. And the guy's like, well, let me see what I can do. I'll call my supplier. Well, he didn't realize I could hear him. I was standing about 20 feet away with my back to him, but I could hear the whole conversation. And I ended up basically getting 4 tires for the price of 2, because he's on the phone and he's like, hey, look, this guy's big and he looks mean and I don't want to piss him off. He's like, I don't care. Just give him all 4 tires. And he was just afraid to tell me no. And, I didn't do anything, but just being that big. And I had buddies, we'd go out in town. I had one friend in particular that would purposely walk 20 to 30 feet behind me just to see everyone's reactions when I walked by, because, people would wait till I passed and then be like, oh my God, they'd be pointing and like, did you see that? But you get used to it. And like with my sons and stuff, they got used to it, especially like when I was, at peak in powerlifting, and, people would recognize me and come up and, want pictures or autographs sometimes or whatever. And, they would just get used to it. Like there was one time we were at the beach and I went to go up to the bathroom, and literally one person recognized me and came over and started talking. Within minutes, there was like a crowd of 30 people, and it took me like 45 minutes to use the restroom. But yeah, you just stand out in public, and people definitely treat you very differently.
The other thing that's interesting is being a powerlifter. There's lots of people, I'm going to say lots, but who are 280 who aren't pulling the kind of weight you're pulling, right? It's not always obvious looking at someone how much weight they can lift, right?
No, not at all.
So when you would go to the gym and you're pulling these insane poundages, would everyone just stop and like be like, holy crap?
Well, most of the time, I trained in my garage, and I was lucky to have a really good group of training partners. And it was at that point we were pretty much training like mostly in garage and key club type gyms and stuff like that. I didn't train very often in a commercial gym, usually only if I was on the road or, stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, definitely people definitely paid attention and like you said, you can't tell. I mean, there's some really big bodybuilders, guys that are giant that aren't that strong. And there's some other people that kind of have like this skinny fat physique and they're strong as an ox. And you're like, how in the hell do they move that weight?
You mean like Jason Genova?
Yeah. And there's a lot of people out there. I just remember local lifters. And I mean, that was a lesson I learned in high school too, was that I wrestled for a long time, loved wrestling. It was my favorite sport in high school. And I remember early on being at a tournament and seeing this guy and thinking like, oh my gosh, he looks, kind of femmy. And I hate, it sounds terrible coming from me now. And but I thought, who's this guy? And I don't think it helped that his school colors were purple and yellow, but I made a comment, and this was as a freshman at my first varsity meet. And
what'd you say?
I was like,
you remember? What did you say?
Yeah, I was something like made some kind of very misogynistic, probably not even homophobic, but very bad comment, and something about like, oh, who's the Nancy or something like that. And I remember one of the older guys on the team, there was one of the team captains, looked at me and said, oh, really? And they're like, he's like, do you have any idea who that guy is? And I'm like, no. And they're like, yeah, he was third in the state last year.
Yeah.
And I remember that guy mopped the floor with everyone at that tournament. And I think he got best wrestler and like crushed everybody. And I learned that lesson early on, that you cannot tell anything about a person just by looking at them.
There's this power lifter on YouTube named George Lehman, and he had this amazing video which applies to my industry and every industry, where he says the people who are just above average, they're the ones who are the cockiest and have something to prove, that when they get to the actual elite level, they are like, okay, whatever. Like when I did work with MMA fighters and people go up to them in bars and be like, I could probably kick your ass. They'd be like, yeah, you probably can. Because
nothing to prove.
You're world champion. The numbers speak for yourself. It's like, okay, fine. If you can squat 2,000 pounds, more power to you, literally.
Yeah, and that's exactly true. And when I was with Muscle Tech, I hung out with a few of the pro MMA fighters and met Nate Marquardt and Todd Duffy, and hung out with Todd Duffy a number of times. And Todd Duffy at that time, he was one of the most feared guys on the planet. And, this giant guy with huge knockout power. And I remember hanging out with him at a couple of clubs in Las Vegas after the Olympia. And he was like the most polite, like going through a crowd. Yeah. Oh, excuse me. Like, and he could mop the floor, with anyone. And, had no, didn't try to act like a tough guy. Didn't, wasn't doing anything like that. And it becomes the same way with lifting, when people, and it's funny because you always run into these guys like in bars and stuff, right? Like they'll ask you how much you lift, and then they try to say something that they think you'll respect, but doesn't sound too crazy, and they really have no idea what they're talking about. And you could say, oh, I bench 400 pounds or I bench 1,000, and they're gonna be like, oh wow, that's cool, bro. And but yeah, there was only one time ever, and I did this just because, and this is not like me or something I would typically do at all. And but all my buddies were there, and this guy was just really being obnoxious. And this is right after I'd broken the all-time world record. So in my weight class, no one in the world had lifted more weight than me ever, so like at that time. And so, yeah, I'm currently #1 in the world. And so this guy's
on earth.
Yeah. And so this guy's like, oh, yeah, I know. He's like, how much you lift or something. And I just kind of answered. And then he's like, yeah. Well, that's really good, man. But I know this guy, and he can lift this like more than me. Yeah. And I just looked at him, and I could see my buddies were all just waiting. And I just said, like, I cut him off in mid-sentence. I'm like, no, you don't. And he's like, yeah, I know that. I'm like, no, you don't. And my buddies just all died laughing because they knew exactly where it was going, right? And
there was that Simpsons episode when it was Dwight Gooden or Darryl Strawberry was on, and Homer's like, you play first base? He's like, yeah, I play first base, yeah. And he's like, are you better than me? And he's like, I've never met you, but yes. It's like, yeah, I can lift more than you. You don't have to ask.
Yeah, pretty confident I can outlift your buddy.
So was it the kind of thing also where you were like Moses, that whenever there's a crowd, the Red Sea parts?
It was funny. It was like that at times. But the interesting thing was there were such interesting dynamics in my life because, in powerlifting is not pro football, it's not pro basketball,
Right.
and it's not like, you go out into, normal everyday places and everyone mobs you. But when you're at a lifting event, it is like that. So like if I was at the Olympia or at the Arnold or a big competition, yeah, it's, fans waiting in line 2 hours to get a picture and an autograph. And, you try to go to the bathroom, you get stopped 10 times. And I was always very appreciative of all that. I mean, just the fact that people showed me that respect and respected what I had done and the work I had put in really meant a lot to me. And, but yeah, one day, so I'd be at these events on the weekends, Muscle Tech or whoever would be, flying me around to go to FIBO in Europe or wherever. And yeah, you're treated like a superstar. Well, then I come back home. I'm still working as a pharmacist on a 9 to 5. And I'm just, I'm just a big jack pharmacist,
right.
but yeah, just an everyday average person. Well, this is also the same period of my life where I'm first going out into public as a trans woman. And and then at that time I don't pass well, and not that that's even something I worry about, but yeah, I was ranging from 260 to 270, 280, still experimenting with hair and makeup and outfits and trying to figure all that out and going out into public. And, you talking about standing out, being a big muscular male, being a big muscular trans woman. Yeah. I mean, he was like, oh my God, what is that? And so one day I'm, treated like a superstar. Next day I'm treated just like the average everyday person. Yeah. And then the next day I'm treated less than human, people staring, whispering, mocking me, stuff like that. And I always worried, that when I first started going out into public, that, I had these images in my head. Oh my God, there's gonna be this group of high school kids and they're all gonna be yelling out loud and pointing and mocking me. And nothing like that ever happened. But there were definitely snickers and you'd hear stuff behind your back, whispers and giggles and stuff like that. And just, people trying to take pictures of me thinking that I don't know what they're doing, right. Over their buddies' shoulders and stuff like that. And then they're all laughing. And so it was a really interesting dynamic, and it was very good for me as a person. It helped me grow a lot. It helped me see stuff from so many different perspectives that, I knew what it was like to be treated, better than most everyone else. And then I also knew what it was like to be treated worse.
You know what it was? I watched your documentary. It was the foundation. Because you went early on, you did not know them. I've done a lot of TV, right? You match the face to the neck, and your face was a nice mask, and there's a line here, and the neck is a complete different color. And I'm watching you at that diner scene, and I'm like, someone needs to tell her to blend.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, I actually used the wrong foundation that day. I mixed up my foundations. It was a different one I had bought, and then realized it was too orange and too dark. And for somehow, I don't know how that happened that day, but I grabbed the wrong foundation. Didn't notice until I was so funny that you say that. Yeah. I cringe every time I see that.
I'm like, oh no.
Yeah.
Someone's intervention.
Yeah.
There's another scene in the movie where it looks like you're pulling a nail out of your body, like as in a hammer and a nail.
Yeah. Oh, it's a long story behind that. So
okay.
So this was, people are like, here's the funny thing too, so here's me now, this trans woman, but back in the day in powerlifting, not only, powerlifting is like a very blue collar hardcore sport, right? A lot of very, very tough people. It takes a different kind of mindset, to put the kind of weights on your back that are going to, rip tendons apart and stuff like that. And so, the sport's filled with very tough people and just a very gritty mindset. And, but, I was known as the craziest of the crazy people, the most intense and like,
that's saying a lot.
Yeah. And I had that kind of reputation. And I mean, that was kind of, my mentality though. Like I was a decent athlete, but I wasn't, like I said, I was 118 pounds playing high school football, and, I loved sports and I was super competitive, and, but I had to work for everything. Nothing came easy. And so my mentality was, I'm going to outwork everyone. I'm going to be tougher. I'm going to work harder. I'm going to push myself further. And it was like, if I want to be better than someone else, I've got to go places they're not willing to go. And so the whole nail thing played into that. So this is how it got started. So back in high school, there was this guy that was a couple years older than me, and he was crazy. He was one of our linebackers, and he was also our kicker. And a couple times during his senior year, he had broken people's legs on the kickoff. Like, he would kick the ball off and tackle them full speed, and just a crazy guy, hit really hard. Well, I had him in a wood shop class. And one day, I don't even know what started, but one day he pulled out this huge safety pin and like stuck it in his arm in front of everybody, and everybody was freaking out. And so then after that, when I went home, I just kept thinking, like, gosh, could I do that? Because it looked super uncomfortable, right? And so first thing I did, I went home, went in the bathroom, shut the door, pulled out the biggest safety pin I could find, and then forced myself to drive it into my arm.
Why didn't you start with the small one and work your way up?
I guess that's what he had done. So I had to, I had to
world record.
There you go. And But for me, it was about being able to force myself mentally to do something that was uncomfortable. And then it became this thing where if I could force myself to do stuff like that, I could push myself further in training. So when I was hurting, when the pain set in, and when I didn't want to go further, I could force myself to go that extra mile. And but the whole nail thing started when I was in the Marines. Bunch of young testosterone-filled Marines, crazy stuff always happens, right? And somehow, I don't know, I must have told one of my friends about the needle story or something like that, and then they bugged me until they wanted to see it. I did it, and then it became this thing. And so one night at a party, my one buddy would call it my trick. And he would just say, you got to show everyone your trick. You got to show everyone your trick. Of course, there's no trick to it. But he wouldn't tell everybody what it was, but he'd get them all hyped up. And it was we're at this party. There's tons of girls there. And I'm just thinking, they're all going to think I'm a psycho. But he won't drop it. Gets everyone all hyped up. And they're like, oh, we got to see your trick. Got to see your trick. And I was like, okay, find me something. Well, they didn't have any big safety pins or anything like that. So the only thing they could find is a nail. And I'm like, screw it, I'll do it. I said, boil it, sterilize it. And because I'm not crazy, right? I don't want to get an infection.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
I'm totally sane.
Safety first.
Yes, exactly. And so he gets the nail and boils it. And then so I take it. And the funny thing is like, the hot dogs, like the Kogels with the skin on them?
Of course. Yeah.
That's what it sounds like when the nail goes through the skin, right? Because it's not sharp enough to just slide in nice and clean. You have to push really, really hard, and then it'll eventually break the surface. And I'm not gonna make you sick, am I?
No.
But yeah. So I'm pushing. You got a picture. It's like a small apartment with like 50 Marines and their girlfriends all gathered around, and they're watching me, and I'm pushing. Then it finally breaks through the skin, and it makes this pop sound. One of the guy's girlfriends, her knees buckle. She almost passes out, and then after that, it became this thing, and. But then I eventually worked up to bigger and bigger nails, but like I said, it was a mental thing of being able to force myself to do something that I didn't want to do, and able to override that natural instinct to shut your body down.
So do you have like a bunch of little scars from it?
I think there's some little marks on my bicep still from it, and
it was in the bicep, not even the delt.
Yeah, no, I did it in the bicep, and I was trying to make sure I was staying away from any nerves or large blood vessels, stuff like that. But
safety first.
There you go. Yeah.
Wait, so let's talk also about transitioning. So one of the things that's interesting is in the movie, you seemed very kind of meek and soft-spoken. You seemed to be kind of finding your voice. And now you seem to be so much more confident and comfortable in your skin. And it's in such a short period of time. Am I picking up that?
Yeah, for sure. There, to be honest, I've had a lot of self-esteem issues my entire life. And it's funny because they weren't always evident, or people around me weren't aware of that. But so I grew up, like I describe it as poor white trash, because that's where a lot of people don't like to hear that, but that's the truth of it. And that's how people viewed me. And I was definitely seen as less. And I knew this by a young age. Well, then throw on top of that, knowing that I was trans by the time I was 5 or 6, I didn't have those words to put to it or know what it meant, but I knew I had these gender issues. I was, daydreaming about being female all the time. So I was raised Catholic, and I had all this guilt and shame that I was internalizing because of it. I didn't know why I felt this way, but I felt horrible, and it bothered me, and I thought about it 24/7. So I'm growing up with all these issues. First of all, coming from a poor family and being looked down upon, and so people treated me different because of that, and then knowing that I had these gender issues, and then feeling less than everyone else because of that. So these things. So my way of trying to build self-esteem was, if I can beat someone at something, they can't look down on me.
Right.
So if I'm faster than them, if I'm stronger than them, if I'm smarter than them, if I get better grades or whatever it was, they can't look down on me. And I never vocalized any of this or said any of this, but that's how I felt about things on the inside. So I used it as motivation to push myself really hard to achieve a lot of things. And so my whole life I've been walking around with this chip on my shoulder about always feeling like less, and having to do more than everyone else to prove myself that I'm not less.
1,000-pound chip.
Yeah.
Michael Malice here. Want to take a second, tell you guys about one of our sponsors, BetterHelp. If you go to betterhelp.com/malice, you can learn more. What's BetterHelp? BetterHelp is online counseling. They offer professional, licensed counselors who specialize in issues, the kind of issues you all have: depression, stress, anxiety, relationships, family conflict, self-esteem. You dummies, if you don't have self-esteem issues, you should, because you're terrible. What BetterHelp does, it helps you connect with a professional counselor in a safe, private, online environment, and anything you share is confidential. You can get help at your own time, at your own pace. You don't like your therapist? Easy. Get a new one. No additional charge. You could do secure video sessions, phone sessions, chat, text with your therapist. If you go to betterhelp.com/malice, you get 10% off your first month. You fill out a questionnaire. It helps you assess your needs, and you get matched with a professional counselor that you'll love at betterhelp.com/malice. So one of the things that was interesting, because I'm watching this documentary and I'm thinking, okay, maybe she's a crazy person, because what you were saying is you had this image of yourself as kind of this fit female. At the same time, you had this insane amount of muscle mass. And at one point, you were like, okay, she's not crazy, because you're like, yeah, maybe what I want is not actually physically possible. And it sounded like what you wanted was to have that kind of build, but at the same time be able to like throw cars around. So almost like seeing yourself as Wonder Woman.
Yeah,
was kind of the idea.
Yeah, the thing is that, you know, I fell prey to the same thing that so many women do in society, right? This idealized female image that for most women, not just myself, isn't attainable or isn't even healthy to attain. But yeah, I had the whole time I thought to be accepted as a woman and be able to function in society as a woman, I've got to be this thin, you know, small, very delicate looking woman. And that was the only way I'd be able to integrate into society. And really the key was, and what I discovered and what I've discovered now and why you see such a change in my personality is that I've accepted myself. I don't care what anyone else thinks anymore. And, you know, I'm happy with who I am. I accept that I'm very different, and that's okay. And it's totally okay. But, you know, I realized, why am I trying to change myself and do things that I don't want to do to either impress or attain the approval of people that I don't even know, or maybe probably don't even respect. And, but so really it was about me being comfortable with who I am, and, you know, and being okay blazing a path that really didn't exist, you know, being this giant trans woman and being public about that and being open and being comfortable with it. Because I wasn't comfortable. I felt, you know, horrible about who I was. And I didn't like the way I looked. I would get dressed up and want to appear like this, you know, stereotypically feminine person, look in the mirror and start crying, like, because this was horrible. Like, I don't look anything like I want to look. But at the same time, you know, I loved, you know, I'm passionate about strength training. Always have been. I wanted to be strong. I liked having big muscles, but trying to combine those two worlds was super confusing. You know, there was, like I said, there was no precedent for that. And I was stepping outside of, you know, these boundaries, and really, you know, it was very confusing, not only for me, but the people around me, and people, you know, like even now, like, I'm sure when I got out of the car and walked in here, I'm sure everyone on the street was like, oh my God, who is that chick? And, you know, some people see it as a very positive thing, but a lot of people still, you know, I'm still seen as a freak, but I'm okay with that now.
Well, that's the question I had, because all the words that people use in the gym that they find aspirational are like the most offensive words to call you right now, right? Like beast, freak, mutant, gorilla. These are like, yeah, beast mode, man. Yeah. And now it's like, oh, look at this beast. It's like, oh my God, that's so offensive. Like, how do you, what's your relationship like with these terms?
Yeah, it's funny, the freak thing. I've said this before, but yeah, I was referred to as a freak before, you know, before everyone knew I was trans, in a very positive way. Like, oh my gosh, this guy is such a freak, like doing, you know, crazy things that no one else has done. And then, but then now being called a freak in the most derogatory way. But the thing is, like I said, I don't let it bother me anymore. And it's totally fine, like, to realize that here's the thing too. Like, one of the attitudes I've taken is that normal is an illusion, right? Like, I feel like normal is the self that people are comfortable sharing with the world, but we all have stuff we hide, right? We all have things that we're fear we'll be judged for, or people are gonna look down on us for. And so normal is that part of ourself that we feel will be accepted and we're comfortable sharing with everyone else. But everybody's got stuff, right?
Sure.
My stuff is just a lot more obvious and a lot more, you know, outside the boundaries of what you typically see. But I'm just being myself. I mean, this is just, you know, me being okay with who I am. This is who I am. I'm trans, but I'm also passionate about strength training. I love being big and strong. In some ways, I'm very masculine. In other ways, I'm very feminine. I'm just this blurry person who doesn't really fit neatly in any box. But I've just finally gotten to a place where I really don't care what people think about it.
Let's talk about hormones, and because that's something that's a part of powerlifting as a sport, something a part of being trans. So one of the things I would have thought is, okay, she stops taking tests, she starts taking estrogen, all the muscle mass is going to vanish overnight because you had superhuman levels of muscle mass, and that hasn't happened. And you're a pharmacist, so can you explain a bit about how much tests were you running at your most, and what's the situation now?
Yeah, so obviously, okay, I'll give you a little background here. So I was lifetime drug free for a really long time. And for people that aren't familiar with like bodybuilding and powerlifting, there are federations that don't test. Like they basically accepted that, look, it's part of the sport. It's part of what athletes do. Instead of forcing everyone to lie and cheat, we're just going to not test and everybody does what they do. And honestly, it's the most fair. Honestly, it's the fairest way to compete that there is. Because I think there's only two ways to have absolutely fair competition. One, you either have no testing and everybody's on a level playing field and they do what they do. And everyone understands that and everyone accepts that. And then, so it's completely fair. Or you have testing. You have to have a testing method, number one, that can't be beat. And you have to test every single person and they need to be tested frequently. And currently nothing like that exists. So from that perspective, there really isn't a fair way to test because there are always going to be people beating the test. Right. There are always going to be people one step ahead of the game. You know, they either are developing new androgens that haven't developed tests for, or they know how to manipulate their levels to get around the tests or know when the tests are coming and, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And so like in powerlifting and bodybuilding, and there are federations that do test, but there are those that don't. So there's no reason for anyone to cheat. And there's still some people that do that. I don't know how they find satisfaction in that. But for the most part, everyone competes where they belong. But the thing was, I was, you know, it took me a long time, but I was slowly, little by little, climbing the ranks, you know, work my way to the top of the state level in my early 20s. Late 20s, I got to the national level. And then my early 30s, I was finally getting to the world level. Well, I was still lifetime drug free. And the funny thing was, I didn't realize that no one believed me at that time.
If it's at a world level, you assume if everyone else is on gear,
yeah. And I was this crazy person, right? That went out there yelling and screaming and slapping myself. And I always had this fat, chubby face and I always had bad skin. My mom's been on acne medication her whole life. And so I was always prone to that. So I used to joke, I'm like, I might as well be on gear. I already have all the side effects, you know, but, so then at 32, I was diagnosed with testicular cancer.
Okay.
3 weeks before the Arnold Classic. And at that time, there was the WPO World Championships and pretty much the most competitive. All the best lifters in the world were there. And so I was super excited about going and, you know, finally having cracked that level. And then 3 weeks before, I find out I have testicular cancer. And of course, the first thing I asked my doctor was, hey, can we hold this off until after the Arnold? And he looked at me like I was insane. And he was like, absolutely not. And I had surgery like 3 days later.
Can this cancer wait?
Yeah. Come on, it's not that big a deal. I've been carrying it around for at least 6 months, right?
Safety first.
Couple more weeks. And so then after that, well, the funny thing was, you know, I had assumed that I probably had naturally high testosterone levels, right? I mean, you know, I'm at that point, you know, I had totaled, I don't know what my best total was at that point, but well over 2,000 pounds. Like I was squatting 900. Yeah, I had drug free. I had squatted 900, benched in the mid fives, and deadlifted 716. And that was before I ever touched anything. And it took me a long time. Like I said, I was in my early 30s by that point, but I was getting to that level. And so it was always kind of, you know, it was always this temptation ever since I'd been in the Marines and I had a few buddies who, you know, ran a cycle of Sustanon and Anadrol and I saw what it did for them. And, you know, and they were always like, come on, dude, come on, you got to do this. But I was like, no, I want to hold back. I want to see how far I can go without it. And so it was like always this thing, but I was still making progress. So it was like, why? And then it was just like, you know, once you cross that line, I can never say I'm drug free again.
Right.
And, but then, so anyway, so I have my hormones levels tested before I have surgery and, you know, thinking that, because what I was afraid of, I was like, gosh, my levels are probably like way, you know, above average. And then after surgery, I'm going to be average and they're gonna be like, oh, that's fine. But I wanted to know where I was.
Yeah.
But so the funny thing was I have my levels drawn. Turns out my testosterone levels were low, below the normal male range. My estrogen levels were high, and my prolactin levels were 3 times that of a normal male. So my hormones were all like in between this male-female range, which shocked me, but kind of explained a lot and kind of went along with all these feelings I'd had. And but then after surgery, my levels were down even lower, and the doctor's like, well, and I felt like crap, and the doctor's like, well, we should really consider putting you on, you know, testosterone therapy, which I had very mixed feelings about. Obviously, the feminine parts of me were like horrified by this idea, but then the lifting competitive athlete side of me was like, well, hell yeah, this is going to help me make some more gains, and plus I was feeling really crappy, and you know, because I just basically had low levels of almost everything, and then so we started on that. Well, the thing is in sport, it doesn't matter if it's, you know, because you had cancer or your normals are, you know, just test replacement, it's still banned. So at that point, I could no longer compete drug free.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So then, and up to that point, I had been competing everywhere. I had competed in drug free organizations. I had competed in non-tested organizations. I was, I just went where the competition was. I wanted to compete against the best lifters possible. I didn't care what they were doing. And, but so at that point, I thought about it for about 6 months. And I think we started replacement in April. So it was a little bit longer because it was actually December. I still remember December 14th of 2004. That was the day I went to the dark side. And and I can't say I have any regrets. But so I thought about it, for 6 to 8 months, and then said, well, screw it. You know what? If I'm going to do this, let's do it all the way. And, I was a pharmacist. I had been researching it for years and knew a lot about what I was doing, and basically never looked back. And, the funny thing is it's such an interesting culture because like all the drug-free people look at all the drugged people and say, oh my God, I could do what they do if I just took what they took. Well, it doesn't work that way. I honestly believe if you took away all the performance-enhancing drugs, the same people would still be winning. It's not the drugs that make them champions. It's the mindset. It's the work ethic. It's, genetics to some degree, all those things. And, they wouldn't be quite as fast or quite as strong, but you're still gonna have the same people winning. And, so it's like, when you first, in your first cycle, when your body's never been exposed to that, the first cycle is always the best. Like you get this, it takes about 3-4 weeks for it to kick in. And then all of a sudden the gains start coming. And for the next couple months, you basically grow like crazy and get stronger. It's what everybody thinks steroids are like. But after a little while on them, things level off again. And it's basically the same kind of struggle as before, gains little by little, just now you're at a slightly higher level, usually about 10 to 15% higher, depending on the person. And, But yeah, and then I still always kept like safety in mind. I mean, you get some people who just like, look, I don't care. Give me everything. And I'm going to take as much as I can and get as big and strong as I can.
And they die.
Healthcare.
You saw Dallas McCarver, people like that, Rich Pina.
Yeah, it's really hard to sort through what the truth is because the thing is that steroids have definitely got a much worse rap than what they deserve. I mean, at their essence, they're hormones.
Yes.
And at the levels you can take steroids at, there are very few drugs that you can take 10 or 20 times the recommended dosages for months and years and still be okay.
Sure.
I mean, overall, they're very, very safe, but they're just like anything else. There's a difference between use and abuse.
Yeah.
And there are real risks. It's, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of stuff that's been over exaggerated about them causing cancer and things like that. But they can cause an increase in blood pressure. They do cause your HDL cholesterol to go down. They do suppress your normal testosterone levels in most people and things like that. And most of those things aren't something that's going to harm you today or tomorrow, but years down the road it's going to. And especially if you, like in powerlifting, you combine that with somebody who's 300 plus pounds, has no cardio, and eats, everything in sight. So all those factors combined, 10, 20 years down the road, you're looking at a lot of health issues.
Does cardio kill gains? Is that true?
All depends on how that's implicated and not implicated, applied. And cardio can be added in and be beneficial, but there's a tipping point. And like I said, it depends on your priorities, right? When I was powerlifting and trying to be the strongest person in the world, that was my top priority and nothing got in the way of it. And then, well, other than my kids were my number one priority. Powerlifting was second, but definitely above even my career, anything else. But yeah, so it's about priorities and, cardio. Like now I do a lot of cardio but I'm trying to be a more well-rounded athlete. I'm more concerned about long-term health and just being able to, do everyday things. I really enjoy mountain biking and I'm trying to get into rock climbing and some other things where being 250 pounds with terrible cardio does not help.
Want to take a second and tell you guys about Shippo. It's like a hippo made of ships. No, it's not. It's to help you ship things for your business. If you go to lets.goshippo.com/YW right now, you get a free professional plan for 3 months just by signing up. Shippo connects to 55 carriers worldwide, and over 35,000 companies are using Shippo, have seen an average year-to-year growth of 77%. That is a very credible number. They will get you up to 90% off your shipping cost from top carriers like DHL and USPS. You'll save money by easily tracking your customer's entire experience. You can print the labels at home, and you never have to go to the hellmouth, i.e. the post office, again. If you go to lets.goshippo.com/YW, a free professional plan for 3 months so you can spend your energy on growing your business. and they make shipping effortless. Wix. Today's episode is brought to you by Wix. What's Wix do? It helps you build your websites easily. We built LetThatBeYourWelcome.com using Wix. And if you take a look at it, go to LetThatBeYourWelcome.com. If you go to the bottom of the link, you get 10% off any premium plan. They've got over 500 templates to choose from. If you know how to use PowerPoint, you know how to make a website using Wix. It's just drag and drop. You can customize your site easily. Add text, add videos, add images, whatever you want. That's too hard for you dummies? They got you covered. You can build your site using Wix ADI, Artificial Design Intelligence. You answer questions about yourself or your business, and Wix will create a stunning website for you. Let me tell you something. I have bought the URLs of people that I hate in order to clown them. It behooves you, even if you're not a business, to own your own domain name so people can't cyber squat. And if you go to LetThatBeYourWelcome.com and click on that link at the bottom, you get 10% off any Wix premium plan. And you know what? You can even build your website for free by going to Wix.com. Yeah. Oh, go make your own Twitter. You don't have to, but you can make your own website using Wix. Let's get back into it. Wait, but let's talk about the transition from test to estrogen and how that worked.
Okay, yeah. So basically, then I competed for like the next 15 years, or so. Well, no, not that long. I mean, I competed well over 2 decades altogether, but after crossing that drug-free line, I competed. Let's see, that was 2004. I won the Arnold Classic in 2006. And like I said, I was already at that level. I just wasn't one of the very top people, and that kind of helped push me up to that next level. And then in 2009, after chasing it for almost a decade, I finally broke the all-time world record. And then at that point, it's when I decided to transition to bodybuilding and, work towards a pro card, but then transition got in the way of that. I'm doing what most of the competitive athletes did as far as running cycles and stuff like that. It's funny because compared to some people, the dosages I took, people would say, wow, that's baloney. You had to take more than that. But then there's other people that would see it and say, oh my God, I can't believe you took that much. So it's all relative, right? Like there's people out there doing crazy, crazy stuff, and there's people out there that don't do much at all. And it's not always the people you would assume, because everybody thinks like the biggest pro bodybuilders and the strongest powerlifters, it's always like, oh, they're running tons of crap, that's why they're so. No, it's not. And a lot of times the top pros are taking less than some of the local amateur guys. It really depends. But yeah, so I had done all this, for over a decade. And then, so I'm looking at transition and wanting to slim down. And I wanted, the feminizing changes. I wanted to develop breasts. I wanted my face to appear softer and all those kinds of things. And so I started estrogen and, stopped all the androgens and started estrogen. Well, the thing was, and I knew this going into it, but it was even more dramatic than I expected. My strength plummeted. Like within, it was funny because it kind of reminded me of when you first start, taking androgens, that a couple weeks in, all of a sudden you really start noticing the changes and things change very quickly for a while. And, but I was literally going in the gym and every week my lifts were going down 20, 30, 40 pounds.
Oh, that's no joke.
I'd load up the squat bar, get underneath it, something I'd just banged out for a set of 6 weeks before, and I could barely lift it. And I was like, this is insane. Like, I cannot believe how weak I'm getting. And then even worse than that, I was getting fat. And it had been a little different if it had been going to my hips and thighs and maybe giving me more of a, stereotypically feminine shape, but it was actually going to my stomach. So it was the worst of all worlds, right?
Yeah,
I'm getting smaller, I'm getting weaker, and I'm getting fatter. And it's like, bye-bye gains.
Yeah.
And I'm not seeing, the breast development was very, very slow. And we actually had to push my dosages up quite high to get any breast development. And but at that point, the body fat gains and the strength loss weren't worth it for me. And so after several months, I was like, you know what, this isn't what I wanted, and this is not making me happier. So then I backed the estrogen dose back down, and I added some androgens back in, and I added the more mild ones that have the less of the androgenic side effects, the less of the masculinizing side effects. And then ever since then, I've been playing around with my hormones, trying to balance things out, find a place where I feel good and gives me a nice balance of the two. And that's where I'm at. And that's why,
okay,
excuse me, that's why I still am able to retain the level of muscle mass that I do. I mean, when I'm taking is a fraction of what I used when I was competing, and it's a balance of androgens and estrogen, and I'm seeing an endocrinologist and all that stuff, and it's really hard too because I'm blazing a path there that no one's done before.
Yeah.
When I first asked about this, when I first talked to a doctor and said, hey, look, I'm on estrogen, and it's not giving me the results I want, and I'm someone who kind of blurs these lines of masculinity and femininity. What about adding in some mild androgens, not testosterone, because I don't want those masculinizing side effects, but what about taking some stuff that'll give me
like Winstrol or something?
Anavar, Winstrol, yeah, the drugs that that would be considered in the strength training world's female drugs are the ones that basically have a higher anabolic component and less androgenic. And using those so that help me retain some level of strength and muscle mass and keep my body fat lower, but then not interfere with the feminizing effects of the estrogen as much, and try to find that balance. And the first doctor was like, and I think too is one of those things that they had never thought about or never considered, but he's like, this isn't a smorgasbord. You can't just pick whatever you want.
Kind of can.
Yeah, I was
doctor,
like,
that's your job. Yeah,
it's
can.
my body,
Yeah.
and I certainly can. And
it's not
yeah, but I think I just caught them off guard and they didn't know what to say, so that was their reaction. But I was really frustrated by that, so I basically started doing stuff myself, and it's been really hard finding a doctor that is comfortable, monitoring everything that way, and giving me the freedom to help adjust things, but now I feel much better. I think I have a nice balance of that, and I have some of the feminizing side effects that I wanted, like my skin's softer, my face appears softer. Of course, the surgery helped with that a lot, but then that little bit, and it's funny, it didn't take much. Just a very small dose of androgens was just enough to allow me to maintain a decent level of muscle mass and strength. But the thing you got to remember too, I was someone that walked around for 2 decades, 250 pounds plus, one of the strongest people on the planet at my size. So my set point for my body, even if I never did anything again and only use estrogen, I'm still going to be a fair amount stronger than most people. And but that's why, and that's one of the reasons when you start talking about transgender athletes in sports, and people will point to me and say, see, that's why trans women shouldn't be able to compete. Look at Janae Kroc, she'd crush everyone. Well, the fact is, I'm still using some male hormones, and that's why I'm still as muscular and as strong as I am. And without that, I wouldn't be. My performance, like I said, it was amazing how fast my performance was decreasing.
Yeah, but let's suppose you weren't taking those male hormones. You're saying that if you were just using estrogen, you wouldn't crush everyone anyway?
I think, honestly, I think I would probably wind up around the level of most of the strongest women in the world at my size. If I was number 1 in the world as a male, why wouldn't I be at that same level as a female? But it would be proportionate. I wouldn't be lifting anywhere near the kind of weights I did before. I'd be more on par with where the strongest women are. And that's kind of, that's where I was going. And when I was on estrogen, I could clearly see, that's where it looked like my lifts were going to end up at. And but at that time though, they weren't stopping. Like every week I was getting weaker until I pulled the plug on it, and that was within just a couple months.
You must have been freaking out.
I was. Well, it was like it wasn't what I was expecting, right? I thought, okay, like I'm all in here. I'm gonna jump in head first, and let's make this transition. And I'm expecting the breast development, and expecting my body to change and feel differently, and definitely emotionally, and I noticed the changes psychologically and stuff as far as feeling more calm, and differences in my sex drive and things like that. But yeah, my body didn't change the way I wanted it to, and even if it had, in hindsight, I'm not sure that I still wouldn't have pulled the plug at some point. Like I was really trying at that point to still embrace this idea of, the stereotypical female that society, pushes on all women. So I was trying to, still fit that mold. And looking back, I probably still would have pulled the plug at some point and been like, okay, this isn't exactly me, and this isn't exactly what I want. I still wanted to be, a very strong athletic female. And
talk about the effects of hormones on psychology, because I think that's something that people don't appreciate, both running tests, because you hear about roid rage, but also estrogen, like someone's pregnant or hormonal, that's going to affect their psychology. People understand that. These are both hormones, and hormones is how the body controls the mind in many ways.
Yeah, and there's definitely a significant effect with that. Now, the whole roid rage thing, I feel, is extremely exaggerated, and I think alcohol causes way more violence than steroids ever will. That being said, there are some people that are probably more prone to it. I think someone who has a problem with their temper already and tends to be a hothead and maybe is, very aggressive, that push can be a little bit more, push them to the point where they have a little less control over it. And there are definitely certain drugs. Tren, I would say, for those in the community, would be the one, if there's any truth to that at all, Tren would be the drug that people seem to have the most trouble with. That some people just have problems controlling their aggression and stuff like that. But by and large, it's mostly 99% baloney. And I realized that early on. The first person I ever met that was on stuff was when I was in the Marines, and it was the guy that my buddies, we were in the DC area at the time, and there's this guy out of Baltimore, this huge jack guy, and at the time he was like the biggest dude I'd ever seen. And but he was the mellowest, nicest guy you would ever meet, and he was running a ton of gear. And I remember him saying his biggest thing was, he's like, I don't care if I die when I'm 30, but it'll take 10 guys my size to carry my casket. And I mean, that was like his mentality. And
yeah, but can he jam a nail into his bicep?
Yeah, I don't know. And but then that never happened. I mean, he ended up getting off, a few years later or whatever. But I just remember thinking here's this guy running tons of crap, and he's the most mellow, chill dude I've ever met. And then like in my own experience with it, I never had any of those, the roid rage type things. I mean, there were certain times I think I did feel a bit more aggressive, but in a good way. I liked it. Like it made me feel kind of like in that zone, like, when you were, focused and ready and really to push hard, like it just gave me a little bit extra push in that direction. It was subtle, but noticeable. And I actually felt it was a beneficial thing for me. Now estrogen, on the other hand, definitely had like a calming effect. And I'm sure in me being trans and feeling the way I feel, I'm sure there's some things that I would see as positives that other people would see as negatives, but definitely less aggressive, more calm, and but also more emotional. And but with me, I'd kind of always been that way, but I'd worked really, really hard to suppress and hide that. Growing up and being seen as this like super jock alpha male, I would tear up very, very easily with emotional things. And I remember I was very cautious about watching any type of sad movies in front of anyone or anything like that, because I would break down bawling. And actually,
oh, look, check on Matt. What's going on?
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, a great story. So my senior year in high school, go to the movies with one of my buddies, and we're going to see Terminator 2. And thinking that's about as safe as it gets, right?
Yeah.
Man's man movie, right? And well, at the end of the movie, for those of you that have seen it, Arnold, who's the Terminator, who forms a strong bond, like a father type bond with the boy, has to destroy himself at the end and lowers himself into lava. And as he gives a thumbs up as he's going down in the lava. And it is kind of a sad moment. Well, here teams are streaming down my face in the theater, and my buddy looks over at me and he's like, man, that was kind of sad. And then looks at me and then screams, like yells out in the middle of the theater, "You're crying!" And I was like, "No, I'm not," and he was looking at me like back and forth, like all confused, like, is he really crying? Like, what's going on here? But I was like, damn it. And so I was always this emotional type person, and would tear up easy over
sensitive,
things like that.
not emotional, sensitive.
And then once I was on estrogen, it was like, okay, I'm not even gonna try now. It was just that you tear up over all the little things, and it takes a little bit for you to get used to it, when you first start estrogen, the emotions take a little bit to learn how to control and handle. And, but it wasn't really a bad thing. And then now I just don't even worry about those things. If I get emotional, I tear up, I don't mind. Like with my sons, watching my kids compete in sports and stuff. And if one of them won a big wrestling match or, did something, hit a PR at something or something, I'll get choked up and, get a little teary eyed, and that's okay. Like,
yeah, of course, you're proud.
Things. Yeah, exactly. And that's, part of the problem with our culture too. I think people are restricted in so many ways with their behavior and what we feel is acceptable. And, men have all this pressure to not show their emotions and, to be this stoic person, like that somehow makes you a better person. And it doesn't. And it's not healthy to suppress all those things. And then, women are encouraged to be more timid and be more meek and be less assertive. And so it harms them in all those ways. And I've experienced a lot of that on both ends, for so many years trying to be this ultimate alpha male, in which, competitively speaking, I was in so many ways.
Yeah.
But then, but also hiding all these feelings and all these parts of my personality that were really good things, and allowed me, being someone who was more sensitive to feelings, and I formed a lot of really close relationships, a lot of close friends with both men and women, and then being forced or feeling like I was forced to hide those things was really difficult and harmed me in a lot of ways until I finally got to the point where I was okay with those things.
One of the things that was interesting in the film is that your parents did not seem to be very accepting of the situation, to put it mildly.
Yeah.
I mean, what's your relationship like with them now?
I love my parents very much.
Are they Polish? Is that it?
Yes.
I was born in Ukraine, so I know where you're coming from. And it's kind of like, why do you want to do this? And there's not even a pretense of empathy.
No. And one of the things is too, and then you also on top of that, you have to remember, like, I come from a very small town in northern rural Michigan. Everyone there, it's nearly 100% white and very rural, very poor also. I know it when I was growing up, I don't know if it still is, but I know per capita it had the highest percentage of welfare in the state.
Oh, wow.
And so, very, poor rural area. And so that mentality, and then and everyone's predominantly, Catholic and somewhat religious. And so, those things all play into it too. But yeah, not the most accepting environment for someone like me. And I knew that instinctively, but even though, like, I started, realizing I had these feelings when I was 5 or 6 years old, but I knew even then that it's not okay to tell people.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell it. So I had all this guilt and shame, like, what's wrong with me? Why do I feel this way? And fearing if I tell my parents, the reactions can be very negative. And unfortunately I was right.
Yeah.
And then when I finally did tell them, like, my mom, I try to understand things from her perspective too. Like, first of all, she doesn't handle any kind of change well. Like, she's someone that, like, the ostrich technique, put my head in the sand, pretend it didn't happen, and hopefully it'll go away. And then also, I try to understand too that she still lives in that small town and people say stuff to her. And the thing was, before I came out, because of the stuff I had achieved in powerlifting and working in presidential security when I was in the Marines, I was somewhat of this, hometown hero. I had been told there were posters of me up in the high school and stuff like that. And, so for years it was always like, oh my gosh, Matt's so amazing. These things are, so cool, doing all this cool stuff. And then I come out as trans, and then it's all these people like on my mom, like, oh, he needs to find God and this and that. And then, and then my grandma telling her that it's her fault for not taking me to church enough and not raising me the right way, and that she's to blame, and all this stuff.
He wasn't masculine enough.
Yeah. Well, and the funny thing is too, like, people are like, oh, something must have happened to you when you were a child, or you must have been raised in a feminine environment. No, absolutely not. I was never molested in any way. I didn't have any bad experiences. I grew up in a very masculine environment. My dad was very masculine. I was the oldest of 3 boys. I had almost no female playmates. Like, everything, I was in sports the whole time, and I was pursuing lifting, and I was always in a masculine world all the time. Even my mom is very much a tomboy. Like, she didn't wear makeup when we were growing up. She was normally in jeans and a t-shirt. She would go out and hit us baseballs. And, so there was really no femininity in my life. And that was another thing that made it harder. I had no outlets or no way to even experience any of this. And people don't realize too, like, for me growing up, I felt drawn to all this stuff, right? Like, always. And in the same way I was drawn to strength sports. It was just something that was naturally, intrinsically part of me. And I couldn't walk through a department store without wanting to go to the makeup counter, without wanting to go look at the high heels or the purses. And it tortured me. Every time I walked into a store, I'm looking out the corner of my eye, I'm looking at all this stuff and very, very interested in it, but I can't allow myself to partake in it or let anyone else know that I'm even interested in it. So it was like a torture, growing up the whole time. And I always just had this feeling that somehow people would know. They could see what I was thinking and could see what I was feeling. And I felt exposed and very vulnerable. And I hated that. I hated that feeling. And so I just carried this around, all those years. And it had such an effect on my self-esteem and how I felt about myself. I always felt like a freak. And I tell the story a lot of times when I talk at conferences and stuff. You remember the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer cartoons every year, the claymation ones, and we've all grown up on. And do you remember the one with the Island of Misfit Toys?
Yeah, of course.
You had the caboose with the square wheels. When I watched that when I was a child, I thought that's where I belonged. I just saw that and I was like, I'm broken. Like, there's things wrong with me that, can't be fixed. And oh,
don't cry.
Here's those emotions. And but yeah, that's how I grew up feeling about myself the whole time. And so it was not the easiest way to grow up, for sure.
A couple of random questions.
Sure.
What's the best way to break? Let's break it back to seriousness. I don't want you ruining your makeup.
Yes.
What's the best way to break a plateau in a certain lift?
Well, you got to analyze a few things. First, figure out why the plateau exists. Is it an error in your programming? Do you have a body part that's weak? Is it a technique problem? So you kind of need to break it down and figure out what's going on and why, and then attack that. If it's a technique issue, then obviously work on the technique. If it's an error in your programming, if you're overtraining or you're not peaking properly or not addressing certain issues, like with maybe your deadlift lockout's weak, so you need more upper back strength or something like that, address those issues. And then sometimes, a lot of times it's just psychological too. And it's just the way our bodies work. Progress is not a linear, it's not a linear thing. You're not going to go up X amount of pounds in X amount of time all the time. You're going to have peaks and valleys. You're going to have stuff, and you just got to keep pushing, fighting through. Like I said, try to figure out what's going on. And if it's a psychological thing, one of the big things too, I encourage people to do, if you're the strongest person in your gym, or, it's even just considered strong in that group, it's difficult to want bigger things and to see more. So I always encourage people to train with people that are stronger than you. Go to gyms where there's people that are a lot stronger. Go to powerlifting competitions. If you're someone who benches, 315 or 400 and you're the strongest person in your gym, go to a high level powerlifting competition and watch people benching 600-700 pounds. And all of a sudden you realize you're not that strong. And then it totally resets your idea of what strength is, and, opens up your mind to all this new potential and new possibilities. So those are very good ways to help break through plateaus too. Like, recognize that what you're doing isn't that heavy, that you're not that strong, and that there's a lot more out there that you're capable of.
Did you have an arch enemy in the sport?
No, I mean, there was one guy that I was competing at the Arnold that did some things that didn't sit well with me. And I don't know if I want to name names, but anyone who followed the sport and was around those times will know who I'm talking about. So I beat him in 2006. Damn straight. And there's actually a funny story behind all this too. So after I beat him in 2006, he gets online, and him and his friends, and this is back when it was just like the forums. There really wasn't the social media like there is now, but it was forums that everybody hung out in. And they all had very poor literacy skills, and so it was very obvious who was who. And the funny thing is they didn't understand that I was Polish. They thought I was Russian. They didn't even realize that I was from the U.S. They thought I was from Russia, and they kept all of these forums talking about how the Russian cheated and should give this other guy his money and all this stuff. And it's all absurd. I beat him fair and square. I don't even know. I don't know if they just couldn't do math or what they thought happened, but there was really no controversy whatsoever. But yeah, they complained and whined about it afterwards. And then the next year, a funny thing happened, and I didn't even know about any of this until after the competition was over. So my one sponsor, who I was one of their main guys, one of the big faces of their company at the time, had gotten into a beef with the guy who was running the competition, because they had agreed to sponsor it, and they provided all the equipment, all the squat racks, and they were being used at the competition. And in exchange, this guy was supposed to hang up all their banners and everything. Well, they get there, and this is the Arnold, and there's thousands of people gathered around and everything, and none of the banners are up. So the owner of the company I was sponsored by gets into a beef with the guy running the competition. He's like, dude, where's my banners? You need to put them up. That was the agreement. And the guy's making excuses why he can't. And he's like, and it got to the point where I'm going to take my equipment and leave, and you're not going to have a competition if the banners don't go up. And so that got worked out. Well, the funny thing is that this guy that I had beaten the year before was boys with this guy who ran the competition. They were from the same hometown, and that was one of his, I think they even trained at the same gym. And so then during the competition, my first two squats get turned down, and my third one barely gets passed, but I didn't think anything of it. I was whatever. And then we get into bench, and this guy, he had a really good bench press. He was a strong bencher, but he started really high. And his first attempt, he comes up 3/4 of the way, his butt comes way off the seat, which was clearly obvious. And we're up on a big stage in front of thousands of people. It's being filmed by multiple television cameras, and this is all being displayed on a big screen above it, so everybody can see what's going on. His butt comes up 6 inches off the bench, doesn't lock it out. The spotters actually grab the bar, pull it in the rack, and all of a sudden white lights come on. And then we're thinking, the judges somehow screwed up and threw it the wrong way, and that obviously doesn't count. But no, it got past as a good lift. And then they show the replay on the screen. The crowd starts booing. Everybody's like, what is going on? And then his next two lifts, the exact same thing happens. He doesn't lock either of them out. They have to help him grab the bar into the rack. His butt comes up on all three. All three of them get passed. And even worse than that, the final one's an all-time world record. And then some of the other guys that were there that weren't even there to support me, they're freaking out about it. I didn't want to let it get in my head. I'm like, hey, I can't control what the judges do. Yeah. It is what it is. I got to focus on what I'm doing. And but there's other people freaking out this is ridiculous. What the hell is going on? And we didn't understand why. There's there can be bad calls and things happen, but this was way over the top. And then, well, because of and then he gets this huge lead in bench, and I could out deadlift him by a ton, but he'd gotten so far out in front by the time bench was over, I couldn't catch up. I ended up taking second that year, and this guy wins. And then I find out later about my sponsor getting into a beef with the guy who that runs the thing, and this being his boy. So they were trying to make sure that I didn't win that year.
Wow.
And but yeah, I mean, you know, some things that happen. I was like, whatever. But yeah, it's funny some of the stuff that kind of goes on behind the scenes that nobody knows about.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how annoying is Dana Lynn Bailey?
You know, I don't know Dana personally, so I don't want to say anything bad about her. I mean, she inspires a lot of women, and you know, has a lot of fans, so she does a lot of positive stuff.
Sounds like you're bad at math too, huh? I didn't hear a number there. Interesting. What body part were you proudest of?
I would say probably my back.
Yeah, you were very known for that.
Yeah, the strength and just you know, everybody. It's interesting to me too that, you know, almost everyone has like some strong body parts and some weaker body parts. For me, my back was very strong. My legs were strong. My hips were strong, and my shoulders were actually my weak. Like my overhead pressing compared to my other lifts is terrible and always has been. But yeah, my lats were definitely like the body part I was probably known for. And when I got into body, I didn't realize, like from a bodybuilding aspect, how strong they were until I did a show. And then when I saw the pictures afterwards, and people were like, dude, your back's like pro level.
Croc rows. That's the trick.
There you go. Croc rows, chins, and deadlifts. That's what I said. I mean, that's, you know, that's it.
My buddy's a strength coach, Michael Wolf. He was in here a couple months ago, and he competed in nationals, and he had some insane number for deadlift and insane number for squat, and it was like 400 for press. And I thought it was bench press, and I didn't want to say anything because I'm like, there's guys doing that at my gym, 400 and he's like, oh no, it's overhead press. I'm like, oh shit. Yeah, that's insane.
That's impressive. You don't see that many people doing those kind of, other than the only ones I see anyway that seem to be really good overhead pressers are the strongmen. The current best strongmen are crazy. Like, I don't know if you know Rob Kearney.
Yeah.
World's Strongest Gay.
Yeah.
And the dude's an insane overhead presser. And, you know, and then there's, you know, a handful of other guys that have always been good overhead pressers. And that was something I always found very impressive and wished I was really good at, but for whatever reason, I'm just super weak at that exercise, you know, comparatively speaking.
One of the other things that's in the documentary, during the filming, you lost your job, right? So can you talk a bit about that and getting an employment? Because you're raising 3 boys, and that's a big part of the film also, is your relationship with them. And you're very lucky that they kind of accepted you as Janae, and that, you know, they're still such fans of yours.
Yeah. I have a really special bond with my boys. I mean, you know, most parents do, right? But like, I worked very hard at it, and I don't know if it's a combination of me with my masculine and feminine sides, and you know, that allowed me to bond with them really close. But I definitely put a lot of effort into it. But the biggest thing was too, I was honest with them from a very young age, and that's what I tell. And when everyone asks about the relationship I have with my boys, I'm always very clear. Like I was honest with them from the start. I told them when they were 2, 4, and 6. And so they knew that built a lot of trust. They knew if I was going to be open about this, I'd be open about everything. And they knew they could trust me, and I was always going to tell them the truth. And their mom was actually very much against me telling them. She's like, oh, it's going to mess them up. And I thought, no. I said, what would mess them up is if I try to hide this from them. They're eventually going to find out. And when they do, they're going to be like, why did you lie to us? Why did you not tell us? And if this is nothing to be ashamed about, why would you hide it? And so I felt that sent all the wrong messages. And so I told them when they were very young, and I was just like, look, this is me. And it's funny, the way I told them was, you know, I sat them down, and like I said, they were very young. So in an age appropriate way, I kind of tried to explain what it is. And I just said, okay, well, I'm going to change my clothes now. And, you know, 2, 4, and 6, and they're running in and out, and I'm changing my clothes, putting on makeup. And I get all done, and then I call them in, and I'm like, and my oldest, Logan, walks up to me and looks at me. He's like, wow. He said, you look like a girl, a really, really big girl. And we all just busted out laughing, and they went back to playing, and that was that. And then, so it was just always been part of who I am. And, you know, so they've always known that. And yeah, so they never saw a reason to judge me or think of it as a negative thing. It's just part of who I am. And we've always had that really good relationship and a lot of mutual respect. And I'm sorry. And then
losing the job.
Oh yeah,
that was
the job.
You know.
Yeah. So yeah, that was really hard. Nothing like that had ever happened to me, and especially for those kind of reasons. And but yeah, it took.
Well, for those who don't know, who haven't watched the documentary yet, you know, you were a pharmacist for many years, and you know, during the filming of this documentary, after you had surgery to have your voice changed, you came home and you were just basically fired out of nowhere.
Yeah, and I mean, I can't really go into all of it, but yeah, it's definitely, it definitely wasn't something that happened to me before, and hopefully will never happen again. And it was a very unfortunate circumstances and very tough. And it took me almost another year to find another job. And as I was telling you before we were on the air, I submitted 51 applications before I got one interview. And then fortunately that one interview, I got hired, and now I'm working again as a pharmacist. But yeah, that was a very difficult thing. And then to realize too that, you know, after putting out 50 applications, not getting one interview, to realize now, like, you know, like most employers, the first thing they do is Google you. Well, for when you Google me, obviously, you know, all this stuff comes up, and it's mostly all about my transition, being outed and all that stuff. And who knows what people were thinking and why I didn't get interviews and why people weren't interested in hiring me. But obviously that played a role in everything. And, you know, it's tough. It's tough. And then like when I had my interview and I'm walking in there, you know, looking like this, you know, it's hard not to wonder like, okay, what are they thinking?
Right.
Do I even have a shot here? Are they looking at me like, oh my God, we don't want this freak here? And then the funny thing is, after I got hired, I found out that, and where I'm at now, I'm really happy. They treat me very well, and I don't think it's an issue at all. But I did find out that some of my coworkers thought the only reason I got the job was because I was trans, you know? So it's funny that.
Oh, tokenism kind of
yeah,
thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, they needed someone like that, you know, it's, you know, oh, it's all about diversity. Gotta have a trans person in there. And, but yeah, it's interesting, different people's takes on it, and you know, how they think that affects things. And for me, I was just like, hey, look, I can do the job. I've got the experience, and I'm gonna bust my butt and do the best job I can.
How does someone who's such a hard worker and so disciplined handle being unemployed? You must have been going insane.
For me, more than anything, it was insulting, right?
Okay.
It was like to say, you're not good enough for us. And oh yeah, I was not happy. I was very angry. And, but also insulted. I mean, that's how I felt. And, but yeah, I mean, I was still like, I've got 2 LLCs, and I've had these side businesses for a long time, and some of it's involved with like training other athletes.
Okay.
And so I basically ramped all that stuff up because I had scaled that way down because I simply didn't have the time when I worked pharmacist. Same thing now. Like I'm helping a couple athletes now, but just people that have been with me for a long time that I feel like a lot of loyalty towards, and I want to continue to help them. But I don't have the time between my full-time job, my boys, and, you know, training, and then, you know, speaking and stuff like this, and to really train a lot of athletes anymore. But so I ramped up training the athletes, you know, and then I was trying to get as many speaking engagements as I could and do all those things. And I managed to scrape by until I got another job, but it was tough. And I was on the verge of having my vehicle repossessed. I was worried about losing my home.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was like back to like, it felt like growing up to where you're counting change to see how much you have to put gas in your car. And, you know, calculating every little thing you do to make sure you're not going to run out of money. And it's just, there was no stability there. And I still hope to pursue this stuff full time. I want to do like more like what you're doing, like, you know, podcasts and, you know, YouTube videos. And I just feel like the potential I have to reach people and the good I can do in the world as someone who's, you know, talking about being different and embracing who we are and all those things is much more important than, and I hate to say this, I mean, not that my job as a pharmacist isn't important, but there's a lot of people that can do what I can do as a pharmacist.
Right.
But I feel like the position I have with things like this, I'm in a unique position, and I can have a greater, a greater impact on the world, you know, talking about these things and helping people understand differences. And I feel like because of my different backgrounds that I can bridge some worlds that maybe other people aren't in a position to do, you know, like these high testosterone filled, you know, very masculine environments, you know, versus, you know, other very feminine worlds, and like the LGBT world versus like, you know, like the powerlifting culture and the Marine Corps and things like that. Like you know, so I feel like this is where my future lies, and these are the things I really need to focus on, and these are the things that, you know, are the most important, and I can try to help the most people. It's just a matter of figuring out how to make that financially viable.
Are you familiar with Candy Darling, who's a personal hero of mine?
I'm familiar with the name, but I don't know a whole lot.
So she was one of Warhol's people, and she was trans, and basically one of her quotes, which I think applies to you, is you must always be true to yourself, no matter what the cost. It is the highest form of morality. So I'm sure at some point when you're unemployed, you're like, what am I doing? Am I going to lose my kids, my house, whatever, just because I'm a woman? Then you have to realize I can't lie anymore. I tried the other way.
Right. And then for me, that was a big thing too. It was, yeah, like I've said, I would never deny who I am. So even when I first started coming out to my friends and stuff, oh gosh, that would have been about almost 15 years ago now, like 13 to 15 years ago. And I first started coming out, and I told myself, I'll never, if I'm confronted and people ask me, because I knew too, like being open about it as I was, that I could be outed and that potential could happen.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what, I'm never going to deny it. And And there was actually only one time that I did, and I felt horrible about it. And it was like, there were times that rumors, were getting out because I was open with all my close friends. I had told my family, and at the elite level lifting, a lot of my best friends were also other competitive lifters and other sponsored athletes. And I was very open with them about it. And granted, I didn't show up like this to team meetings and stuff,
Sure.
even though everybody bugged me about it. Everybody wanted me to, but it was still very much something I did in private spaces or like when I was home. But I was very open about the fact that I was trans and the things that I was doing. And so, people tell their training partners, word gets around, but it was like this rumor for years that no one really knew outside that community really knew if it was true. But, and every once in a while I'd get asked by different people, and I'd always be like, yeah, that's the truth. That's the real deal. But then there was a person one time not too long before I got outed, that asked me about it. It was someone I didn't know very well. And I remember thinking I wanted to be honest about it, but I thought, man, this could totally out me if I'm honest about this right here. And do I really want to take that risk? And at that time, the only thing that was keeping me from being 100% out was my boys. I was afraid that there might be backlash on them with classmates, their teachers, their coaches. And I had discussed it with a number of my closest friends, and we, as a group, had come to the decision that it's probably best for me to wait until they're out of high school to be fully out about this. So that was the plan until I got outed in 2015, and that kind of all that went out the window. But there was this one time that one person had heard the rumor and asked me, and I so wanted to just say yeah, just like I always had done. But I didn't know this person very well, and I was afraid that could be the pebble that started the avalanche, and so I was like, oh no, that's not true. And then I felt horrible, and to this day I still remember that.
We're running out of time, so last question is, what has been your favorite part of this interview?
Just the fact that you're having me on, allowing me to be open and honest, and with your type of show and the listener base that you have, it's not, you would not expect that someone like me would be, one of a featured guest like this. So I feel very fortunate for that, and I thank you for that. And I hope everyone out there that's listening can do so with an open mind and just realize, like, we're all different in different ways, and hopefully that they've heard today that being trans maybe isn't what they thought it was, and that we're all people too, and some of us are great people, and some trans people are horrible. I mean, it doesn't change that. So so I thank you for that, and I really appreciate it.
You are welcome.